No company, no team, and no individual can be perfect in all ways that are important for the operation and development of a company. Thus, in order to achieve efficiency and to operate with maximum capacity, an important tool is benchmarking. To benchmark means to adapt from the market or from within the company the best practices, innovative ideas, and effective operating procedures that can achieve the best results. What does the process of benchmarking look like in theory? Benchmarking forms an infinite loop that consists of the following steps. First, we search and find a practice, idea, or procedure that is worthy enough to be replicated. Then we learn how this practice works and why it is considered successful. What are the indicators of success? Afterwards, we adapt the practice, idea, or procedure to our situation and to our challenges and our scope. Once this is done, we can implement the adapted practice to benefit our company or team. It is important to notice those best practices can come from outside of the company, but they can also come from within the company. We can look internally at other departments or other teams and adapt their successes. It's no less important to remember that those best practices consist of both specific metrics and procedures to achieve those metrics. Benchmarking tends to be internal when we compare or benchmark something inside the company across different departments or business units. It can be competitive when comparing with some other team or company that is our direct competitor. It can be functional when comparing a specific process externally with a similar one within your industry or business line. If the benchmark is generic, a comparison can be made to unrelated industries or businesses. So how do we practically benchmark in real life? In order to explain the concept, let's look at our main hero, Johnny. If Johnny is comparing how quickly he can run a sprint of 20 meters with his friend Peter, this could be considered an example of internal benchmarking. The winner's success can be analyzed and his metrics implemented towards other runners. If Johnny and his friends play a football game with competing teams, the comparison can be made as to why the competitor is successful, and the best practices can be adapted towards Johnny's team. That's competitive benchmarking. Now, if Johnny looks at how his sister Annie packs her bag for football training and he learns that her method is faster or more effective, that is an example of functional benchmarking. And if Johnny's football coach were to look for any best practices that can be adapted for his football team from, for example, violin players, this would be an example of generic benchmarking. How would those practices look in the real business life of Evolution Gaming? If we were to compare how quickly cards are dealt in blackjack between different teams, that's internal benchmarking. If our teams would search for best practices in effective blackjack dealing from our direct competitor, that is called competitive benchmarking. If blackjack teams would look at some successful processes, ideas, or procedures to be adapted from other functions of Evolution Gaming, for example, programming, HR, or general management, that would be an example of functional benchmarking. If HR at Evolution Gaming were to compare how many sick leave days an employee has per year and compare that with companies in other industries like food retail or education, this is an example of generic benchmarking. To summarize the subject, no company and no team can be perfect in all fields. So in order to achieve the best outcome possible, let's benchmark. How do we do that? Look for numbers, indicators, and metrics of the best practices, not just the hunch. And remember that best practices worthy enough to be adapted can be found both outside the company and in many cases inside, very close to us. Do you see where and how you can use benchmarking?